Marking another synagogue shooting, remembering another dead Jewish worshiper, the latest signal of rising anti-Semitism in the United States, second only to Israel in the size of its Jewish population. And so in Israel, the issue is getting attention, says Eran Shaishon of the Reut Group.
The coverage in Israel for this attack was very wide. Israelis are emotionally reacting to this issue and expressing solidarity with their people in the diaspora. And this is on the background of a growing gap between Israel and world Jewry in the past decade.
Anti-Semitism has come at American Jews from both the right and the left. Even as the Poway shooting made headlines, so too did this cartoon from the New York Times with its left-wing orientation. Israelis, Shaishon says, see all the strains as one.
Israelis are relatively ignorant to the Jewish dynamics in the diaspora and are unnuanced regarding American politics. So Israelis, for example, do not make the distinction between anti-Semitism from the left or anti-Semitism from the right.
For relations between Israel and American Jews, Shaishon says, it's actually left-wing anti-Semitism that poses the greater threat. Left-wing anti-Semitism, he says, is couched in terms of criticism of Israel, and so drives a wedge between Israel and American Jews.
Increasingly, Jews are seeing it as an Israeli problem. And as a result of this dynamic generated from anti-Semitism on the left, there's a growing criticism of our Israeli government policies, and the temptation to disengage from Israel is high.
Left-wing anti-Semitism posing particular challenges, even if it's right-wing anti-Semitism that has actually killed. Owen Alterman, I-24 News.
Well, let's bring this discussion now back to the U.S. and go to New York and speak with Evan Bernstein, Regional Director of the Anti-Defamation League. And Evan, the ADL certainly has been ahead of the curve on these issues, sounding the alarm. Some had even accused it of being alarmist at one point. That's certainly not the case now. Let me ask you, this happened 6 months after the Pittsburgh shooting. A young man who, even if it was a lone wolf, appears to have been somewhat on the radar of law enforcement, and maybe even if not, should have been, and yet the crime was carried out. So what needs to be done now by authorities to prevent this kind of shooting?
First of all, thank you for having me, and clearly our hearts, and thoughts and prayers are with the community in San Diego and the families of the victims. Our Center on Extremism, yes, has been talking about white supremacist movements and the impact that it's making here domestically now for some time. I think it's imperative that we start looking online more. This shooter also put a manifesto out online, just like the previous person in Pittsburgh did the same, utilizing the internet to promote messaging, to get ramped up as a lone wolf. It's one of the hardest things that law enforcement can have, is trying to find those lone wolves that are out there on the internet getting riled up and able to speak to other like-minded white supremacists or right-wing extremists from around the country within seconds, and can get very, very engaged and very, very ramped up to the point now of where they're going into synagogues and killing people. It's something that law enforcement needs as much resources as possible. There needs to be more resources at the federal level to be able to provide those resources and trickle down into local law enforcement and start taking right-wing extremism as seriously as possible.